Hi, Beth Neville for Art and Life today on a sweltering hot July day. And we have in front of me the amaryllis, which has faded, and it's just leaking red color all over everywhere. So the way you get this ready for a new bloom next year is you cut it off, and we're definitely going to get rid of this thing that is bleeding red all over everywhere. Okay? So just give me a minute. We'll be right back. So if you want to keep this amaryllis blooming, what you do is you cut off the stalk, the flowering stalk, and try not to get that red color all over everything. And you put it outside as it was before here in our garden, and continue to water it and allow the leaves to grow and allow the bulb to regenerate. Then at the end of the year, at the end of the season, you cut it completely back down to the bulb, take the bulbs out of the soil, and put it in a cool, dry place, usually upside down or on its side, in the dark. Basement's the best place for it. And then come the fall, you can start, it has to go in dormancy, then you take it out and repot it. And if you're lucky, you'll get it to bloom again. And hopefully at Christmas time and not in the middle of the summer. However, we had a good time with our amaryllis. Now we're going to work with 3 different media today. So we're going to put the amaryllis back over where it was, get it out of the way, over there. And the 3 media are going to be, we're going to talk again about how to do the amaryllis with either crayons or with markers. This is the one we did in the last segment. We're going to recap that for just a brief moment. And then, not too long on that one, then in order to prepare for the lesson today, the discussion, I've done 2 drawings. One is the preparation on this oil paper for working with oils, and the other is a drawing done on watercolor paper, which I did copying this one very quickly. So I'm not going to be able to complete these drawings today, but at least we'll have a chance to see how different they look in different media. That would be magic marker, watercolor, and oil. All right, last week, in order to describe how to get the amaryllis, the form of the amaryllis, we did this little sketch. It's very much like the shape of the amaryllis, but a marker is a little bit heavy-handed. Occasionally, it makes a very nice, very bold drawing, as it did for the advertisement I did for Pierce Middle School. So what I'm going to do now is take thin markers. Last week we worked with a thick one, but if you really were interested in perfecting this, which I am not, I would switch over to a fine marker, and that would give a more delicate kind of a finish. If we remember the amaryllis, the color fades off into a pure white. So I would kind of approach it something like this, filling in here, and then just softly come in and try to blend this a little bit more. Now here's where the markers would be very helpful. That would be in the fruiting part of the flower. Supposing we pretend these are green, they're not, but we could make a very fine line here to indicate the filaments and the anthers and so on, because the thin marker makes a very fine line. Magic markers, or markers as these are called, are very, very useful. I've made 2 excellent, beautiful book covers for my husband using these very fine lines, because what I did was I built up the lines this way and created beautiful patterns, abstract patterns, using a very, very fine marker line, often very small parallel lines. So I have found markers to be very useful in illustration, particularly for illustration. So let's put this aside, and we're going to switch over to two more media. I think we're going to start with the watercolor. Yes, I think that's what we'll do here. So we'll push this aside. Now, to keep things very simple, I've selected a different color set, and only 3 basic colors. And just for the fun of it, I've picked a Winsor violet and a permanent mauve, and this is rose madder. So these 3 colors are all in the same range of the same tone, same color set. So we'll dip into this one. I'm working right from the tube. So there's the rose madder. All right, that's rose madder. Got a good strong color. Try not to run. If you do this, I had to cut the tube open. It's made out of aluminum foil. And I did it because the top had dried out. Now we're going to go back into the water, clear the brush a little bit of that color, and I'm going to put out on the tray here, directly on the tray, just a little bit of that diazonine violet. This one's a brand new tube, so it's very liquid. And then we're going to get out, hopefully, oh dear, we've got a problem here. The mauve is not opening. Oh, there we go. And I don't have my, you should always carry pliers with you, with your paint supplies in watercolor, because very frequently they dry up, and the tops do, and it's very hard to get them open. So if you have a pliers with you, you can open them up. All right, now let's see what this color looks like. A very strong purple, and I believe this one will be equally strong, a little bit more red in it. I hope you can see the difference between this color and this color. Now what I'm going to try, oh, that worked perfectly. Yes, so added a little bit of this, the rose madder, and we now have 3 different shades of a violet. I need a little bit more of this paint now, just a tiny bit. We don't want to waste paint, it's so expensive, incredibly expensive watercolor. All right, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4 different shades. All right, now I think for purposes of demonstration, I'm going to start with this forward petal, which is very easy to understand. And if we remember from last week, when the flower was still alive and blooming, it had a white center, and the edges were the darker color. Now I'm deliberately changing the color, and I'm going to outline. I've got a pretty big brush here. I don't know whether this is going to work or not with a brush this large. So we're going to come in here very slowly, working rather quickly so we don't create a line there. And I think we're going to say that is going to be that petal. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is, before this completely dries, get a little water on my brush, not a lot, and I'm just going to try to very carefully blur that edge with a little bit of water. If you put too much water on, the whole thing is going to go to a giant, horrible puddle. But if you just add a little bit of water, just a tiny, brush damp. Okay, that's kind of cool. I like that. Yeah, I like that a lot. Now, Supposing you say, well, now I'm going to paint this petal. This petal must be dry, absolutely dry, before you start the next one. And I'm going to shift, I'm going to do the underside here and shift to a darker violet. I'm going to do that, and I'm deliberately choosing a different hue here because I want to portray this as being in the shadow. Okay, we define the edge, leave white in the middle. All right, just using the tip of the brush. All right, now into the water. Get your brush damp, but not soppy wet. And with clear water, we're going to soften those edges. Now I'm going to do another thing while this is still wet. I'm going to shift to a different brush, which I seem to have lost. All right, we're not going to do that because I don't know what happened to the brush. Okay, we'll just use this one. All right, I'm going to go into a much darker color and just tint this kind of wet on wet before it dries, because I want a very strong shadow there. All right, we're going to have a strong shadow over here on this one. So while we're still got that same wonderful dark color, dark value, we're going to kind of come in here, all right, and watching your edge, try to keep your edge crisp. Hopefully, this is where I find for this style of drawing and so on, it helps to have a drawing. As we've discussed in other segments of art and life, you can do it without having a drawing, but for this type of work, I find it important to have a drawing. Now I can see, if I hold it up, that this edge is dry. There's no glisten. There's glisten here, glisten here. So that's still wet, but that edge is dry. So that means that we can hop over here with, whoops, I want it darker. I want more dark violet. Oh, still not dark enough. I want it closer to this. Yes, there we go. Because I don't want it to match that petal. I want it to be different. So we can come in here. And lo and behold, we can also, this is also dry. So we can come in here, pull away, define the edge. Don't leave any white there. All right. All right, this has had a chance to kind of dry a little bit. Now, back into the water. Make sure, you see how I'm rubbing the paintbrush against the glass? I'm getting the water out of the paint, out of the bristle area. So it's not loaded. They call it loading the brush. It's not loaded with paint. And at this point, very carefully, I can bleed those edges out. Let's do the same thing over here. I want to bleed the edges out just so it's a softer, gives it a softer look, less harsh contrast. All right, there are other ways of accomplishing this as well, but okay, that was really neat. All right, you see what happened here? We came with almost white water, clear water, and just came down into there, and that created a very nice light cut of a look. Now, at this point, it has to dry up, and what I'm going to do is to take the rose madder and put it here and here. So we've got to let this dry just a little bit. While we're doing that, we can work on the ovoid part of the flower. If you watched last week, this is the female part of the flower here, and it blends in. All right, we're sort of stuck here, waiting for things to dry. So I think we're going to stop with this, and I will, when I finish this, we'll have it up on the video screen so you can see what's going on. But I can't do anything more with this until it dries. That's where amateur artists get impatient. They say, oh, let me get in there and paint it. Well, you can't. If it's wet, it's going to bleed together. The rule is wet colors run together. wet colors run together. So we just have to let it dry. So we're going to put this one aside, and we're going to switch over to the oil paint, and we'll have a little bit of time. We don't need the water. We don't need any of this stuff. Put that over there. And let's just see. Oh, here's the other watercolor brush. I knew we had it. Hiding. Just when I needed you, you were hiding. That's not nice. Okay, so what do we got here? Trying to keep it very minimal, all right? I didn't bring down any green. We're working outdoors. And thank you to my husband, Robert, for doing the video, and to Tom Pilla for doing the editing. And we're outside working on my porch in this wonderful, delightful weather. And to keep it really simple, I've only chosen two hues. One is white, a zinc white, and the other one is, this is rose, all right? So hopefully we'll be able to get the tops off without trouble. Put out a little bit of rose. We don't need very much, not a lot at all. Okay, and we're going to get out the white. Here's the white. We're going to need a lot of white. Now I find that it's easier to start with a light color here and add the dark. And let me point out, well, this is so important. Oh my goodness. Okay. What's the difference between watercolor and oil paint? The biggest difference is for watercolor, if you want it white, you let the white paper show through. You don't paint the white with Chinese white. You use the paper. With oil paints on this oil canvas, which is a very cheap material, but it works for this, you paint in the white first. So you start with the white. Now I hope this is going to work. I wanted you to see the drawing. I really love this drawing. Why is the green there? It's because the green was on the canvas before I started. We're just going to ignore that, okay? Pretend there's no green there. I like this drawing very much. I love the way the leaves kind of cascade around, the shape. I might have fun finishing this painting. So I'm going to start with the white, and I'm hoping that the orange color I used for the marker, so that you all could see what I was doing, because it's very hard to see pencil, will not show up. So I'm putting white paint on here, which I doubt that you can see. But there's going to be white here, there's going to be white here. Maybe it'll show up in the video, but just trust me, I am painting white, and it'll become more obvious when I start adding the rose. So this is white. And you notice with the oil paint, see how, I'm just kind of putting the color down more freely. I'm staying within my drawing lines, not deviating from the drawing lines, but I am being a little bit more free, because you can make corrections with oil. If you screw up, you can fix it. If you screw up with watercolor, you're going to have a big problem. All right, now we're going to add some of the pink. I'm going to mix it here, the rose. We should call it by its right name, the rose. All right, and I'm going to go to the dark shading areas. Oh, there's something so satisfying about oil paint. It's just, it really, oh dear, watercolor's fun, but boy, oil paint has its place in life. So I'm adding in the dark areas, in the shadow areas, I'm putting in the rose color, and these edges are going to help to define the petals. All right, so it's probably difficult for you to see what's going on here, but hopefully it'll begin to make sense. So here we're coming in here, and then we're going to mix with the white. See what's going to happen? We've got the rose, but it's going to blend in with the white paint to make a very delicious pink. Just, oh boy, sort of like strawberry ice cream. Now, as I said, I'm deliberately keeping the colors to white and one shade of rose, just to make life simple, but painting simple. But if I were doing this, just for my own, I would definitely incorporate another color, another hue. I'm not sure which one. Not an orange. There's no way I would go towards an orangey shade for this amaryllis. I would go to something in the violet range, but that's what I would do. All right, now, what fun. Look at that. There's the amaryllis. Isn't that cool? Oh, man. Oil paint's such fun. Over there, we're struggling with the watercolor. And here, of course, there'd be no doubt that I would continue to work with this and kind of refine it more. But there it is. Wow, that was fun. Now, you know what? That was so fast. I think we're going to very quickly go back to the watercolor, which has now dried. Let's see if I can pull this off. Get all this stuff out of the way, get back to the watercolor. All right, let's see if we can't finish this one up. And now that we have our small brush, we're going to go for a very, very watery, lots and lots of water for this outside edge. So we're going to take on this petal and that petal, which are front. They're in front of this, which is back. So we're going to keep the value. That's how light or dark something is. We're going to keep the value very light and try to leave a lot of the paper, the white paper, showing, so that we have, and more water here. Yes, that's good. Yeah. So the goal here, yes, that's what has to happen. Now with that same value, we can even add a little bit more, taper these off a little bit more, make it a little bit more subtle. And I think now the discrepancy between the maroon and this is too strong. So I'm going to dip into the red, the rose, and add, my friend Heather Putnam, who takes my class, said, oh, I watched on TV, YouTube, and the artist said he was glazing. Glazing, never heard the term, but anyway, if that's what he wants to call it, well, glazing. I just call it adding another color. But then, maybe the technical term is glazing. I don't know. For me, it's just, adding another shade. Now I'm going to darken this a little bit. I think that's just a little bit too, and this one is definitely, well, let's take care of that. This is too much here. We've got to darken that side, and that would be very dark. Okay, so that gives you an idea. I think this, if you want to smoosh that, you just take a damp brush, so you say, and just kind of, I call it smushing, smush that a little bit. Yeah, that's much better. Now, you could continue to refine this by adding, like I would make that very dark back there because it turns the corner. I'm not happy about this. You want to make sure you leave some white paper. Don't get rid of all the white, because then it gets too heavy and turgid. All right, yeah, that's pretty good. And I would probably make this one somewhat similar. All right, I think that's a good place to stop. All right. Thank you, Robert, for turning the camera around. Okay, so we've done 2 episodes on amaryllis. And if you have an amaryllis, see if you can get it to bloom, either at Christmas or maybe get it to bloom in late, hot July. Okay, we'll see you next week, and we may be doing zinnias next week. Zinnias are in bloom now, and they're a simple flower to work with. So hope to see you next week for Art and Life. Beth Neville for Milton XS TV.